I never thought I'd see my father cry. Not like this. Not with rage contorting his face, as he waved the bank statement in the air, his hands shaking. The statement that showed their retirement account, nearly $2 million, had been drained 3 days ago. How could you do this to us, Amanda? His voice cracked. Your own parents. We were gathered in the living room of my childhood home, the same room where Mom had taught me piano, where Dad had helped me with math homework, where family photos still lined the walls in neat chronological order. Now it felt like a courtroom, and I was on trial. My brother James stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, jaw set in that self-righteous way I'd seen too often lately. My sister Catherine paced behind Dad's armchair, occasionally pausing to shoot venomous glares my way. Even my youngest brother Michael, usually the peacemaker, sat in stony silence. Well, Catherine demanded, nothing to say for yourself? I looked around at their faces, faces I'd known all my life, faces now twisted with accusation and betrayal. 3 months ago, we'd all sat in the same room celebrating Dad's retirement. Now they thought I'd stolen everything he'd worked for. Actually, I said quietly, reaching for my phone, I have something you all need to hear. More lies, James scoffed. The bank records are clear, Amanda. The transfer came from your IP address, using your old login credentials. Dad trusted you with emergency access, and this is how you repay him. I held up my hand. Just listen. I'd pressed play, and suddenly different voices filled the room. Their voices recorded 2 weeks ago in this very house when they thought I was out of town. It's perfect. Catherine's voice crackled through the speaker. Amanda's credentials are still in the system. Once the money's gone, all evidence will point to her. But why Amanda? Michael's voice, uncertain. She's always been the responsible one. Exactly. James cut in. That's why no one will question it when the truth comes out about her gambling addiction. I still don't like it. Michael again. Framing our own sister. Look, Catherine's voice hardened. Dad's pension isn't enough. The medical bills are piling up. This is the only way to access the money before it's all gone to Mom's treatments. Amanda will take the fall. We'll find most of the money in an offshore account, play the heroes, and Dad will never know we were behind it. The recording ended. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad's hands had stopped shaking. Now they were completely still. The bank statement crumpled in his grip. Catherine had frozen mid-pace, her designer heels rooted to the carpet. James's face had drained of all color. There's more, I said into the silence. Would you like to hear the part where you discussed faking documents about my supposed gambling debts? Or the call with your friend at the bank who helped you trace the IP address to my home office? You recorded us? Catherine's voice was barely a whisper. No, I replied. Your own security system did. The one you insisted on installing last month. It has excellent audio capability and an interesting cloud backup feature. I turned to Dad, feeling the weight of his gaze. I discovered their plan last week. That's why I've been tracking all account activity. When I saw the transfer this morning, I knew they'd finally done it. But the money is still gone, Dad said slowly. I pulled an envelope from my bag. No, it's not. The moment I saw the transfer, I called the fraud department. They froze the account. I handed him a document. This is the paperwork showing the funds being returned. It should be back in your account by morning. Michael had started to cry silently. James was gripping the mantel so hard I thought his fingers might break. And Catherine looked like her entire world was collapsing. Why? Dad's voice was hollow. My own children. Mom's experimental treatment costs more than insurance will cover, I said quietly. They thought this was the only way to get the money without telling you how bad her condition really is. Dad's head snapped up. What about her condition? Catherine made a small, choked sound. James swore under his breath. Even Michael looked away. The cancer's back, Dad, I said gently. It's spread. Mom didn't want you to know, because you just retired. She's been hiding the symptoms, but she needs more aggressive treatment. Soon. The bank statement finally fell from Dad's hands, drifting to the floor like a dead leaf. Helen. He whispered Mom's name like a prayer. That's why I've been coming over so much, I continued, helping her cover it up, taking her to appointments while telling you we were going shopping. But last week, when I overheard their plan, I gestured to my siblings. I knew I had to stop them. This wasn't the way. So what? Catherine suddenly snarled. You're the hero now. The perfect daughter? At least we were trying to do something. By committing fraud, I stood up slowly. By framing me? By betraying Dad's trust and risking his freedom with fake offshore accounts. I had a plan, she insisted, but her voice wavered. No, I cut her off. You had desperation and greed. A plan would have been coming to me 3 months ago when you first found out about Mom. A plan would have been working together, legally, to help our parents. What do you mean? Dad asked. I pulled out another envelope. My company's been doing well. Very well. I've been trying to tell you all for months, but no one ever wanted to hear about my boring tech job. That bonus I got last quarter, it wasn't $50,000 like I told you. It was $500,000. More silence. More stares. I've already spoken with Mom's oncologist. I continued. My insurance can cover her as a dependent. The treatment she needs. It's approved. All of it. I tried to tell her last week, but she was too afraid of worrying you, Dad. Catherine's legs seemed to give out. She sank into the nearest chair. Why didn't you say something sooner? Would you have listened? I asked quietly. When have any of you ever listened to me about my work, my life, my success? It was easier to believe I was still the quiet bookworm who needed looking after. Easier to think you could frame me, because who would believe I had anything to lose? The sound of a car pulling into the driveway cut through the tension. Mom was back from her bridge club, which I knew had really been a doctor's appointment. So what happens now? James finally spoke, his voice rough. I looked at each of them in turn. That depends on Dad. I have evidence of attempted fraud, conspiracy, and bank access violations. The police would be very interested. You'd send your own siblings to jail, Catherine whispered. You were willing to send me, I reminded her. But no, I stopped the transfer in time. No actual theft occurred. If I turned to Dad, you want to press charges, that's your choice. But right now, I think Mom needs to know we all know the truth. About everything. The front door opened. Mom's footsteps in the hall. Her voice calling out a cheerful greeting that seemed to echo in the heavy silence. One more thing, I said, as her footsteps drew closer. The treatment starts Monday. I've already arranged medical leave from her teaching job. And Dad, I met his tear-filled eyes. Your retirement fund is safe. But maybe it's time to retire from keeping secrets in this family. Mom appeared in the doorway, her scarf arranged carefully to hide the weight loss none of us were supposed to notice. She froze, taking in the scene before her. Dad clutching forms, Catherine crumpled in a chair, James pale as a ghost, Michael wiping tears, and me. me finally standing in my truth. Helen, Dad said softly, standing up. We need to talk. The sun was setting outside, casting long shadows through the windows. In a few hours, everything would change. Truths would be spoken. Plans would be made. A family built on appearances would have to learn to be real. But for now, in this moment, I watched my mother's face as understanding dawned. Not just about her secret being revealed, but about how far her children had been willing to go. Some to help her, others to exploit her illness, and me, to protect not just our parents, but the very essence of what family should mean. The recording still sat on my phone, proof of betrayal and desperation. But maybe, just maybe, it could also become the catalyst for something else. Healing, honesty, and the kind of love that doesn't need schemes or secrets to survive. As Mom sank into Dad's waiting arms, I saw Catherine reach for her own phone, probably to call her lawyer. James started making excuses about needing to leave. But Michael met my eyes and mouthed two words. I'm sorry. It wasn't over. The aftermath of this day would ripple through our family for years to come. But at least now we were dealing with truth, not shadows. And sometimes, that's where healing begins. The morning after our family's darkest secrets spilled out, I sat in my office staring at emails I couldn't focus on. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since dawn. Mostly messages from Michael, a few terse texts from Dad about Mom's first oncology appointment, and dozens of missed calls from Catherine that I wasn't ready to answer. James hadn't tried to contact me at all, but his wife Rebecca had sent a single message. He's meeting with his lawyer. Be prepared. I already was. At 9:47, my assistant buzzed. Miss Sullivan, your brother Michael is here. I found him pacing my reception area, looking like he hadn't slept. When he saw me, his eyes filled with tears. I should have told you, he blurted out. When they first suggested it, I should have warned you. I led him into my office, noting how his eyes widened at the view of the city skyline. Like Catherine and James, he'd never bothered to visit my workplace before. Nice office, he said weakly. Guess you really have done well for yourself. Sit down, Michael, I said, gesturing to the leather chairs by the window. Tell me everything. What poured out over the next hour was worse than I'd imagined. Catherine's gambling debts, hidden from her surgeon husband. James's failing law practice, crushed under malpractice suits he'd never mentioned. They'd been desperate long before Mom's cancer returned. They thought Dad's retirement fund was the answer. Michael's voice cracked. Using your credentials, making it look like you'd stolen it. Catherine said she could make it trace back to offshore accounts she controlled. And you agreed to help them? I kept my voice neutral. He buried his face in his hands. I didn't know what else to do. Mom needs the treatment. And they said you wouldn't help even if we asked. That you'd become cold, focused only on your career. Did you ever think to actually ask me? We barely know you anymore, Amanda. He looked up. You missed the last 3 family Christmas parties. You're always working, always traveling. Catherine said. I interrupted softly. Did you ever think Catherine might be wrong? Before he could answer, my phone buzzed. Dad's message made my heart stop. Mom collapsed. We're at Memorial Hospital. Come now. The next few hours were a blur of hospital corridors and medical terms. Mom's oncologist explained that the cancer had spread more aggressively than they'd thought. She needed to start treatment immediately. I found Dad in the hospital chapel, looking older than I'd ever seen him. I should have known, he whispered as I sat beside him. All those bridge club meetings. The weight loss she blamed on a new diet. She was trying to protect you. And our children? His voice hardened. Were they trying to protect me too when they planned to steal my life savings? I took his hand. They were scared and desperate. But Dad, what they did, trying to frame me? That wasn't about Mom's treatment. That was about their own problems. As if on cue, my phone lit up with an email from James's lawyer, threatening legal action for defamation and illegal recording. I almost laughed. He still thinks he can bully his way out of this. Dad read the email over my shoulder, and something in him seemed to break. What happened to our family, Amanda? When did we become people who scheme and betray each other? Before I could answer, Catherine appeared in the chapel doorway. She looked terrible. Designer clothes wrinkled, makeup smeared. The doctor needs signatures for Mom's treatment, she said, not meeting our eyes. Then, barely audible, I can't afford to help with the payments anymore. Thomas found out about the gambling debts. Your brother James just threatened to sue me, I told her. Still think framing me was your best option. She flinched. I never thought. We assumed you were just a mid-level programmer. How were we supposed to know you'd become so successful? You could have asked, I said simply. Any time in the last 5 years. But you were all too busy believing I was still the little sister who needed protecting. Or in your case, exploiting. That's not fair. No, Dad cut in, his voice like steel. What's not fair is discovering my children were willing to destroy their sister to cover up their own mistakes. What's not fair is your mother fighting cancer alone, because we were all too wrapped up in appearances to see her suffering. Catherine started to cry. Not her usual elegant tears, but ugly, racking sobs that echoed in the small chapel. Thomas wants a divorce, she choked out. James is being disbarred. Michael's wife left him last night. Everything's falling apart. No, I stood up. Everything's finally coming into focus. The lies are falling apart. There's a difference. Just then, my phone buzzed again. A text from my assistant. FBI agents here asking about Catherine Sullivan and James Sullivan. Possible fraud investigation. I showed the message to Dad. He read it, closed his eyes for a moment, then looked at Catherine. Your sister stopped you from stealing my retirement fund, he said quietly. But what else have you done? What other schemes are out there, waiting to explode? Catherine's sobs turned to hiccups. James said he could fix everything. Use the retirement money to pay off our debts, then find most of it in Amanda's fake accounts. We'd be heroes, and she'd be in jail, but he said she deserved it for abandoning the family. I never abandoned anyone, I said sharply. I'd built something for myself. There's a difference. Dad stood up slowly. Catherine, go tell your mother you love her. Then go home and call a lawyer. A real one, not your brother, Amanda. The FBI can wait one day, I said, understanding what he wasn't asking. Mom's treatment starts tomorrow. That's what matters right now. As Catherine stumbled out of the chapel, Dad turned to me. Your mother and I, we failed somewhere. Raised children who could turn on each other like this. No, I touched his shoulder. You raised children who made their own choices. James chose arrogance. Catherine chose deception. Michael chose weakness. And I chose to stand alone rather than be part of their schemes. And now, what do we choose now? I thought about the recording still on my phone, about James's threats and Catherine's tears, about Michael's remorse and Mom's quiet strength. Now we choose truth, I said, no matter how much it hurts. The next few weeks were a storm of lawyers, federal agents, and family therapy sessions. James was disbarred for multiple ethics violations beyond just the attempted fraud. Catherine's gambling addiction came to light, along with a trail of financial destruction that led to her divorce. Michael's wife came back, but their relationship was fragile. And Mom, she fought. The treatments were brutal, but she faced them with a grace that humbled us all. I moved her and Dad temporarily into my guest house, closer to the hospital and away from the media circus, as James and Catherine's crimes made local headlines. One evening, as Mom rested between treatments, Dad found me on the back patio. "Your mother asked me something interesting today," he said, settling into a chair. "She asked if we'd ever told you how proud we were of your success." I kept my eyes on the sunset. "You didn't need to." "Yes, we did," he sighed. "Maybe if we paid more attention, valued your achievements instead of treating you like the little sister who needed protecting, maybe things would be different." "Maybe," I agreed, "but we can't change the past." "No, but we can learn from it." He pulled out an envelope. "I've updated my will. Everything goes into a trust that you'll manage. Not because you are the only one I trust with money now, but because you were the only one who never saw it as the most important thing." I thought about the recording that had started all this, about choices and consequences, about the difference between protecting family and enabling destruction. "James's sentencing is next week," I said quietly. "Catherine's rehabilitation program starts Monday. Michael's in therapy. Mom's numbers are improving. We're all finding our way back to some kind of truth." Dad reached over and took my hand. "Thank you for stopping them, not just from stealing the money, but from becoming people who could live with that kind of betrayal." I squeezed his hand, remembering the little girl who once thought her family was perfect. We weren't perfect now, far from it, but maybe we were finally real. Inside, I could hear Mom's quiet laughter at something Michael was reading to her. The sound carried through the evening air like a reminder that even broken things can heal, given enough time and truth. The recording that had exposed everything was still on my phone, but I didn't need it anymore. Its purpose hadn't just been to stop a crime. It had been to shatter the mirrors we'd all been hiding behind, forcing us to finally see ourselves and each other clearly. As the sun set on another day of our new reality, I thought about family and forgiveness, about strength and redemption. The money had never been the real issue. It had just been the catalyst that revealed who we truly were, and more importantly, who we could choose to become. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more healing, more choices. But for now, in this moment, we were finally facing our truths together. And sometimes, that's the greatest victory of all. I never thought I'd see my father cry. Not like this. Not with rage contorting his face, as he waved the bank statement in the air, his hands shaking. The statement that showed their retirement account, nearly $2 million, had been drained 3 days ago. "How could you do this to us, Amanda?" His voice cracked. "Your own parents." We were gathered in the living room of my childhood home, the same room where Mom had taught me piano, where Dad had helped me with math homework, where family photos still lined the walls in neat chronological order. Now it felt like a courtroom, and I was on trial. My brother James stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, jaw set in that self-righteous way I'd seen too often lately. My sister Catherine paced behind Dad's armchair, occasionally pausing to shoot venomous glares my way. Even my youngest brother Michael, usually the peacemaker, sat in stony silence. "Well," Catherine demanded, "nothing to say for yourself?" I looked around at their faces, faces I'd known all my life, faces now twisted with accusation and betrayal. The Sterling Grand Hotel hadn't changed in 15 years. Same crystal chandeliers, same Persian carpets, same judgmental whispers echoing off marble walls. I stood in the lobby, invitation card rolling between my fingers, watching the city's elite filter into the annual Madison Prep reunion. Ms. Alexandra Crawford? The concierge approached with practiced deference. The Wellington Ballroom is ready for you. I smiled, noting how different that deference felt now compared to when I was just James Crawford's rebellious daughter. Thank you. I'll wait a moment. My phone buzzed. A message from my executive assistant. Financial Times confirms tomorrow's cover. Market reaction already trending. CNBC wants an exclusive. Perfect timing. 15 years ago, I'd walked these same floors in a borrowed dress, listening to my classmates brag about their family legacies and trust funds. The Crawford name meant something then. Old money, old connections, old expectations. Until I broke them all. Oh my God, Alex. A shrill voice cut through my thoughts. You actually came. Melanie Porter Hampton, former class president and current social climber extraordinaire, air-kissed my cheeks. Her eyes swept over my Channel suit with the same calculating assessment she'd once used to judge everyone's prom dresses. We weren't sure you'd show, she continued, voice dripping honey-coated venom, given everything that happened with your family's situation. Ah, yes, the situation. When I'd rejected my father's demands to join the family investment firm, choosing instead to start my own company. When I'd sold my trust fund shares to fund my first startup, causing a scandal that still echoed through country club corridors. I wouldn't miss it, I replied smoothly. How's Thomas's hedge fund doing? Her smile flickered. Everyone knew her husband's fund had lost half its value in the last quarter, just like they knew he'd been quietly begging for investors at every social event this season. Managing, she said tightly. But enough about us. How's what do you call it? That little online business. Before I could answer, more familiar faces approached. William Street Clare, whose father had cut me off from family investments when I went solo. Catherine Aldridge Ross, who told everyone I was having a mental breakdown when I sold my Upper East Side apartment to fund my second venture. Alex Crawford, back from exile. William's laugh carried across the marble floors. Still playing entrepreneur? I took a slow sip of champagne, remembering similar mockery from years ago. The difference was, this time I wasn't here to prove anything. I was here to reveal everything. How is that going? Catherine leaned in, perfume expensive and interest fake. We heard you were struggling? Daddy mentioned something about rejected loan applications. Of course he had. Richard Aldridge never got over me turning down a partnership at his bank. Actually, I smiled, business is quite interesting at the moment. Oh, darling. Melanie's voice carried just enough to draw attention from nearby groups. You don't have to pretend with us. We all know startups are risky. There's no shame in admitting defeat. I'm sure Daddy would take you back at Crawford Investment Group. The growing circle of onlookers barely concealed their smirks. This was what they'd come for, the chance to see the prodigal daughter humbled, crawling back to the fold. Speaking of Crawford Investment, William cut in. James finally sold it, didn't he? After the market crash? Such a shame. But that's what happens when you trust the wrong people. The wrong people. He meant me, of course. They all blamed my departure for my father's eventual downfall, conveniently forgetting his risky investments and outdated strategies. Bill, I said quietly, using his childhood nickname. How's your family's shipping business? He stiffened. Managing. Really? Because I heard Docker Tech's new AI system is revolutionizing container tracking, making traditional methods obsolete. His face paled slightly. Docker Tech was my company's latest acquisition, a fact that wasn't public knowledge yet. Well, Melanie jumped in, clearly enjoying the tension. At least some of us maintained standards. Not everyone can handle real business, can they? Some people are better suited to smaller ventures. The ballroom had grown quieter, more people drifting toward our group. The show they'd been waiting for was starting. It's sweet that you keep trying, though, Catherine added with folk sympathy. Still chasing that dream of being independent. But really, Alex, isn't it time to be realistic? Join something stable? I checked my watch. The waiter should be arriving any moment. You know what they say, Melanie continued, warming to her audience. You can't fight legacy. We all end up exactly where we're meant to be. Some of us, she gestured to the gathered elite, at the top. And others. Miss Crawford? Right on cue, the waiter appeared with a silver tray. Today's Financial Times, as requested. I accepted the paper with a quiet thank you, aware of every eye in the circle watching. The front page faced down against the tray. Oh, keeping up with the markets? William smirked. Planning your next small venture? I turned the paper over slowly, letting them all see the cover. My portrait, professional and powerful, above the headline. Alexandre Curawford, EMTUREQRENUR of the year. How one woman built a $12 billion tech empire in secret. The silence was absolute. Melanie's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on marble. Catherine's carefully maintained smile cracked. William looked like he'd been slapped. You were saying something about legacy? I asked softly. About ending up where we're meant to be. The article continued below my photo. Crawford Technologies' revolutionary AI systems have quietly dominated market sectors from shipping to banking, with over 70% of major financial institutions now running on their platforms. Sources confirm upcoming IPO could value the company at over $20 billion. That's impossible, William stammered. Your father said. My father didn't know? I cut in. None of you did. That was the point. I let them digest that as I pulled out my phone, pretending to check messages. Actually, I was recording their reactions. A little gift for my PR team, who'd orchestrated this moment down to the last detail. But the loans. Catherine's voice had lost its condescending edge. Daddy said you were begging for financing. Your father, I smiled, like everyone else, saw exactly what I wanted them to see. It's amazing how much you can accomplish when people underestimate you. The whispers had started. Phones were coming out as people Googled my name, finding the carefully timed press releases that had just gone live. The truth about who really controlled the technology revolutionizing their family businesses. Now, I continued, enjoying the way they flinched at my voice, about that small venture of mine. The night was young, and I hadn't even shown them everything yet. After all, the magazine cover was just the beginning. The Wellington ballroom buzzed with barely contained chaos. The same people who'd been smirking at my failure minutes ago were now frantically typing on their phones, discovering just how deep my success ran. Docker Tech, mainframe systems, quantum finance. William muttered, scrolling through his phone. You own all of them. Technically, I replied, accepting a fresh glass of champagne. Crawford Technologies owns them. I just own Crawford Technologies. Catherine's husband, a junior partner at Goldman Sachs, pushed through the crowd. Alex, we should talk. Privately. About potential partnerships. Like the partnership your firm rejected last year. I smiled. When you said my proposal was amateur at best. He paled. That rejection had cost Goldman billions in potential revenues. Their competitors, who had signed with my company, were now dominating the AI-driven trading market. My phone buzzed again. A message from Marcus, my head of acquisitions. StreetClair shipping stock down 12% in after-hours trading. Investors connecting the dots about Docker Tech. Want me to proceed with the takeover? I typed back a quick hold. No need to crush William's family business tonight. That could wait until Monday. Alexandra. A familiar voice cut through the chaos. We need to talk. Richard Aldridge, Catherine's father and CEO of First Manhattan Bank, stood before me. The same man who'd laughed me out of his office 3 years ago when I'd approached him about modernizing their banking software. About what, Richard? About how First Manhattan's trading platform is now obsolete? Or about how your competitors are using my company's AI to outperform you 10-1? His face reddened. You deliberately misled us. No, I corrected him calmly. I offered you a chance to be part of the future. You chose to see what you wanted to see. A failed socialite playing entrepreneur. That was your mistake, not my deception. Melanie, who'd been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly found her voice. But your father, after the crash, you let everyone think. I let everyone think exactly what they assumed. I cut in. That I was desperate, broken, asking for loans I didn't need from banks that didn't matter. It's amazing how much people reveal when they think they have the upper hand. The screens around the ballroom, meant to show nostalgic photos from our prep school days, flickered to life. A series of business headlines began scrolling. Crawford Technologies revolutionizes banking security. AI giant acquires Docker Tech in stealth move. Tech's most mysterious CEO finally revealed. My PR team had perfect timing. You've been planning this, William accused. All of it. The reveal, the timing. Of course I have. I met his eyes steadily. Just like you all planned every snide remark, every closed door, every whispered rumor about my failures. The difference is, my plans actually worked. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Janet, my chief legal officer. Board memo leaked. First Manhattan considering emergency weekend session. Want me to send the acquisition proposal now? I smiled faintly. Richard must have missed that detail in the Financial Times article. The part about Crawford Technologies having enough cash reserves to acquire his bank outright. Mr. StreetClair? A young analyst pushed through the crowd, phone pressed to his ear. Sir, the Hong Kong office is calling. Something about our shipping contracts being invalidated. William's face went from red to white. What? Docker Tech's new terms of service. I explained. They take effect at midnight. Didn't anyone read the fine print? The room erupted in fresh chaos. More phones ringing, more urgent whispers. These people were finally realizing that while they'd been mocking my small business, I'd built something that could make or break their family fortunes with a single policy change. Why? Catherine's voice cracked slightly. Why do it this way? Why not just tell everyone from the beginning? I turned to her, remembering all the times she'd excluded me from charity boards and social committees after my breakdown, because you all needed to learn something. Success isn't inherited, it's built. And sometimes, it's built in silence while people like you are making noise. Alexandra. Another voice, older, commanding. Bernard Wellington AI, our old headmaster and current board member of half the companies I now controlled. This is unprecedented. No, I corrected him. This is overdue. For every girl you told to think smaller, dream safer, stay in her lane. For every innovation you dismissed because it didn't come from the right family or the right background. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. My phone lit up with a message from my executive assistant. CNBC anchor waiting. Live interview in 20 minutes? I checked my watch. Right on schedule. Now, I address the room. If you'll excuse me, I have a business to run. Several, actually. As I turned to leave, Melanie grabbed my arm. Wait, what happens now? To all of us? I looked at her perfectly manicured hand, then back at her face. That depends. On Monday, Crawford Technologies begins implementing its new partnership standards. Companies that align with our values will thrive. The others, I shrugged. Well, there's always your family names to fall back on. Oh, wait. The silence that followed me to the door was sweeter than any revenge I could have planned. But this wasn't about revenge. This was about power. Who really had it? Who only pretended to have it? And who had been quietly building it all along? Outside, my driver held the door to a sleek Maybach. Not the flashiest car in Manhattan, but certainly the most expensive. As we pulled away from the Sterling Grand, I opened my laptop to review the next phase of acquisitions. The reunion had been just the beginning. Monday would bring the real fireworks, and I hadn't even revealed my biggest move yet. The Sunday headlines rolled in like thunder before a storm. Tech's hidden giant. Crawford Technologies, set to dominate market. Wall Street stunned by stealth success of Madison Prep alum. First Manhattan Bank calls emergency board meeting. Street Claire shipping stock plummets in pre-market trading. I sat in my penthouse office, watching the sunrise paint Manhattan's skyline in shades of gold. The same view I'd had when I started this journey, back when the penthouse was my only asset and Crawford Technologies was just 3 people working out of a converted storage room. The CNBC interview has 2 million views already, my PR director Sarah reported. Social media is exploding. #Crawford takeover is trending. And the other matter? She smiled. Your father's assistant called. He's demanding a meeting. Of course he was. James Crawford, the man who told me I was throwing away generations of legacy when I started my company, would be watching his carefully constructed world unravel. Schedule it, I said, for after the morning announcements. My phone buzzed. A message from Melanie. Alex, please. Thomas's fund is already down 30%. We can work something out. I archived it without replying. Let her feel the same desperation she'd enjoyed watching in others. At precisely 9:00 a.m., Crawford Technologies' new partnership terms went live. The requirements were simple but revolutionary. Complete transparency in business practices, ethical AI implementation, and a minimum 30% diversity quota in executive positions. Companies had until Friday to comply or lose access to our systems. The market reaction was instant. Companies that had sneered at my small business were now watching their stock prices swing wildly based on whether they met Crawford Tech standards. Ms. Crawford, my assistant's voice came through the intercom. Your father is here. He wouldn't wait. I straightened my Armani blazer. Send him in. James Crawford had aged since I'd last seen him. His hair was grayer, his stance less commanding, but his eyes still held that same mix of arrogance and anger. "What have you done?" he demanded without preamble. "Built something," I replied calmly. "Isn't that what you always wanted?" "Built something? You've destroyed relationships that took generations to establish." William's father called me in tears. Richard Aldridge is facing a board revolt. Fascinating how quickly generations of relationships crumble when the power dynamic shifts. He slammed his hands on my desk. "This isn't how business is done." "No," I agreed. "This is how business should be done. Transparent, meritocratic, forward-thinking. You've made enemies of everyone who could have helped you." I pulled up a screen showing Crawford Technologies' market valuation. The number made him step back. "I don't need their help, Dad. I never did. That's what you never understood. While you were all protecting your little circle of influence, the world changed. I just changed with it." "And now what?" he demanded. "You'll destroy everything we built." "No, I'll rebuild it. Better, stronger, more equitable." I stood, meeting his gaze. "The acquisition offer for Crawford Investment Group is still open, by the way. Though after today's market shift, I might need to adjust the price down." His face reddened. "You wouldn't dare." "Actually, I already have. Check your email." As if on cue, his phone buzzed. The color drained from his face as he read the updated offer. 40% lower than last week's valuation. "You can't." "I can. I did. And on Friday, when our new standards take effect, it'll be worth even less." I walked to the window. "Unless, of course, you implement the changes I've outlined, starting with the board composition." He stared at me, finally seeing what everyone else had missed all these years. I hadn't just built a company. I'd built a revolution. "The car will take you back to your office," I said, effectively dismissing him. "You have until Friday to decide." After he left, I opened my laptop to join the emergency board meeting of First Manhattan Bank. As their newest major shareholder, a position I'd acquired through a series of shell companies, I had some suggestions about their future direction. My phone lit up with another message, this time from Catherine. "Just heard about Mom's foundation. Please, we can explain." Ah, yes, the foundation. I'd almost forgotten about my team's audit of their charitable giving. The irregularities they'd found would make fascinating reading for the IRS. The afternoon brought a parade of former critics turned supplicants. William's father, begging to maintain their shipping contracts. Melanie's husband, offering inside information about competitor funds. Each one trying to save themselves from the tsunami they dismissed as a ripple. At 4:00 p.m., I had one last meeting. The Madison Prep Board of Trustees had requested an urgent discussion about their technology education program. Apparently, they'd heard about Crawford Technologies' new educational foundation, the one planning to fund tech scholarships for girls from underprivileged backgrounds. The same program they'd rejected when I'd proposed it 15 years ago. "Miss Crawford?" My assistant appeared. "The trustees are here, and there's something else." She handed me a tablet showing a live feed from the Sterling Grand. The reunion was supposed to continue through tomorrow, but the ballroom was empty. The elite who'd gathered to celebrate their status had scattered, too busy salvaging their empires to maintain social appearances. I smiled, remembering all the parties I'd been excluded from, all the whispers about the Crawford girl who'd lost her way. "Your next interview is in an hour," Sarah reminded me. Bloomberg wants to discuss the IPO. Push it to tomorrow, I decided. Tonight, I have other plans. I took the elevator to the ground floor, nodding to the security team as I crossed the lobby. Outside, the evening was painting the city in shades of purple and gold. My driver opened the door to the Maybach. "Where to, Miss Crawford?" I gave him an address, one I hadn't visited in years. The small apartment where I'd started coding my first program, where I'd eaten ramen noodles while building the foundation of what would become Crawford Technologies. "Taking a trip down memory lane?" Sarah asked. "No," I smiled. "Picking up something for tomorrow's press conference." In my bag was the original business plan, written on cheap notebook paper, along with every rejection letter, every dismissive email, every condescending response I'd received. Tomorrow, they would become part of the Crawford Technologies Museum exhibit, a reminder that success doesn't always wear a familiar face. My phone buzzed one final time. A message from the Financial Times editor. Follow-up story confirmed. How Crawford Technologies is reshaping global business runs tomorrow. Front page again. I put the phone away, watching the city lights flicker to life. Somewhere out there, my former classmates were realizing that their world had changed forever. The social hierarchy they defended so fiercely had been rewritten. And I, the girl they'd written off as a failure, had done the rewriting. Success, I whispered to the city skyline, is the best revenge. But this wasn't just about revenge. It was about change. Real, lasting, systemic change. And I was just getting started. The invitation arrived on thick cream paper, gold embossed with a family crest. The Blackwood Family Annual Gathering. It read in elegant script. Beneath it, a handwritten note from my mother. "Sarah, please try to dress appropriately this year." I traced my fingers over the embossing, remembering how much these invitations used to mean to me. How I'd spent years trying to prove I belonged at these gatherings, where success was measured in stock portfolios and real estate holdings. Now, at 34, I just felt tired. Tired of the games, the judgments, the constant need to justify my existence to people who'd written me off long ago. My brother Marcus had always been the golden child. Harvard Business School, perfect wife, perfect kids, and now running our father's investment firm. I was the disappointment, the one who'd walked away from a promising position at Goldman Sachs to start my own venture. Throwing away your future, Dad had called it. They didn't know about the late nights, the risks, the careful planning. They didn't know about the offshore accounts or the quiet investments that had turned my initial savings into something beyond their imagination. I'd kept it all hidden, letting them believe what they wanted to believe. I smoothed my blazer and checked my reflection one last time. The woman in the mirror looked nothing like the eager-to-please daughter they remembered. Sharp suit, perfectly styled hair, quiet confidence in her eyes. I slipped a small USB drive into my pocket, my insurance policy for what I knew was coming. The family estate loomed ahead as my car pulled through the iron gates. 3 stories of old money and older judgments. Marcus's Range Rover was already parked out front, along with an assortment of luxury vehicles belonging to various aunts, uncles, and cousins. "Sarah," my mother's voice carried across the marble foyer as I stepped inside. She air-kissed my cheek, already frowning at my choice of outfit. "We were beginning to wonder if you'd show." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied smoothly. The living room was already full. The usual crowd of Blackwoods and their spouses, all engaged in their favorite pastime, comparing successes and subtly undermining each other. Marcus stood by the fireplace, holding court with our cousins. He looked up as I entered, that familiar smirk playing across his face. "Little sister, we were just talking about you." "I bet you were." I smiled politely, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing server. "All good things, I hope." "Actually," he said, voice carrying just enough to draw attention, "we were discussing your recent situation. The startup? Dad mentioned you've been trying to secure additional funding." And there it was, the trap he'd been waiting to spring. I'd been expecting this, had planned for it, even. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his leather armchair, while Mom suddenly became very interested in adjusting a flower arrangement. "Is that true?" Aunt Margaret peered at me over her glasses. "Sarah, dear, there's no shame in admitting when it's time to come home. The family business always has room for—" "She's broke," Marcus cut in, unable to contain himself. "Aren't you, Sarah? That's why you've been avoiding the country club, turning down charity gala invitations. Dad says you even sold your condo." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to me. This was his moment, the one he'd been orchestrating for months. Marcus, the responsible one, finally proving what a liability his wild sister had become. "Poor thing," he continued, voice dripping with fake sympathy. "She's lost everything. But don't worry, sis. I'm sure we can find you something entry-level at the firm. Maybe in HR?" I took a slow sip of champagne, letting the moment stretch. Years ago, this would have destroyed me. Now it just felt small. "Actually," I said quietly, "I've been meaning to share some news." I pulled out my phone and connected it to the ancient projector Dad insisted on keeping in the living room. "Since we're all here." Marcus's smirk faltered slightly as the projection flickered to life on the wall. "What are you doing?" "Showing you my situation," I replied calmly. The first page of my offshore account statement appeared, numbers clear and impossible to misinterpret. $50 million in liquid assets, and that was just the beginning. The silence in the room shifted from smug to stunned. I could hear someone's champagne glass shatter in the background. That's not possible," Marcus stammered. "Your company, the funding, failed. I finished for him. That's what you wanted everyone to believe, isn't it? What you've been telling the family. Interesting theory. Wrong, but interesting." I clicked to the next slide. Company valuations, property holdings, investment portfolios. 5 years of careful growth and strategic planning laid bare. "You see, while you were all writing me off as the family failure, I was building something real. And unlike the family firm, which lost 30% of its value last quarter." "Yes, Marcus. I saw the reports. My ventures have been quietly thriving." Dad stood up so quickly, his newspaper fell to the floor. "Sarah, what are you saying?" "I'm saying," I met his eyes steadily, "that your children took very different paths. One followed the rules, played it safe, relied on the family name. The other built an empire from scratch. And now I'm worth more than the entire family business combined." Marcus lunged for the projector, but I was faster. I switched to the final slide, a pending acquisition offer for his precious firm. His face went from red to white as he read the company name at the bottom of the letter. My company name. "You," he choked out. "This is some kind of trick." "No trick," I said softly. "Just good business. Isn't that what you always taught us, Dad? Buy low, sell high, and never let emotions cloud your judgment." The room erupted in chaos. Aunt Margaret was fanning herself with a magazine. Uncle George was frantically typing on his phone, probably checking stock prices. And Marcus just stood there, champagne glass dangling forgotten from his fingers, staring at the evidence of everything he'd gotten wrong. Mom stepped forward, her society smile cracking at the edges. "Darling, why didn't you tell us?" "Would you have believed me?" I asked simply. "Or would you have assumed I was lying, like you believed everything Marcus said about my failure?" The truth hung in the air like smoke, impossible to wave away. Years of dismissal, of snide comments at family dinners, of being the cautionary tale they whispered about at country club brunches, all of it shattered by a single bank statement. I gathered my things, ready to leave them with their shattered illusions. But before I reached the door, I turned back one last time. "Oh, and Marcus? About that entry-level position? I think you might be needing it more than me. The board votes on the acquisition next week. I'd update your resume if I were you." The door closed behind me with a satisfying click, leaving only silence and the faint sound of my heels on marble. In my car, I finally allowed myself a small smile. The game they'd been playing for years had just changed forever. And I hadn't even shown them everything yet. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was worried, but because my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Text messages, voicemails, emails. The Blackwood family network was in full meltdown mode. "Aunt Margaret, darling, let's do lunch. Just us girls. Uncle George." Very impressive presentation. Perhaps we could discuss some investment opportunities. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years suddenly remembered my existence. But nothing from Marcus or Dad. Their silence spoke volumes. I sat in my home office, watching the city lights flicker beyond floor-to-ceiling windows. The view from the penthouse never got old, though none of my family knew I owned it. Just like they didn't know about the tech incubator I'd built in Singapore or the sustainable energy patents I'd acquired last year. The wall of diplomas caught my eye. MBA from Stanford, advanced degrees in software engineering and international finance. All earned quietly while they thought I was finding myself. The latest edition made me smile. A feature in Forbes, carefully framed, but not yet hung. The Silent Billionaire. How one woman built a tech empire in secret. My phone buzzed again. A message from Lisa, my chief operating officer. "Board members from your father's firm have been calling nonstop. They want to move the vote up to Monday." Of course they did. Marcus would be scrambling, trying to block the acquisition. But he was 3 moves behind in a game he didn't even know he was playing. I typed back, "Let them. Everything's ready." A soft knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. "Come in, James." My assistant entered, tablet in hand. "Ms. Blackwood, you have a visitor downstairs. Your brother." I checked the time. 11:47 p.m. How does he look? "Like someone who just lost his kingdom," James replied with a slight smile. "Security asked if you want him sent away." "No," I said after a moment. "Send him up. And James, have the files ready." Marcus looked nothing like the smug heir apparent from earlier. His tie was loosened, hair disheveled, that carefully maintained mask of superiority cracked wide open. "How long?" he demanded as soon as he walked in. "How long have you been planning this?" I gestured to the leather chair across from my desk. "Planning what, exactly? My success? Or your comeuppance?" "This is our family's company," he spat. "Dad built it from nothing. You can't just swoop in and take it." "Actually, I can. And technically, Grandfather built it. Dad inherited it, just like you were supposed to. The difference is, I built something of my own. I opened my laptop, turning it to face him. But since you're here, let's talk numbers. Your management of the firm has led to a 30% drop in value. Client retention is at an all-time low. 3 major accounts have quietly begun moving their assets elsewhere. His face paled. How do you know about that? I know everything, Marcus. Every mistake, every covered-up loss. Every time you blamed your team for your bad decisions. Did you really think nobody was watching? He slumped in the chair, the fight draining from him. What do you want? Want? I raised an eyebrow. I don't want anything from you. I'm offering you a way out. The board votes on Monday. When they accept my offer, and they will, you have 2 choices. I slid a folder across the desk. He opened it with shaking hands. Option 1, fight me, lose spectacularly, and watch your reputation in the industry crumble. Option 2, step down gracefully, accept the generous severance package I'm offering, and start fresh somewhere else. Generous? He scoffed, but I saw his eyes widen at the number. This is blood money. No, it's business. The thing you claim to understand so well while mocking my choices. The difference is, I learned from watching Dad's mistakes. He built a company. I built a future. Marcus stood abruptly, the folder clutched in his hand. Dad won't let this happen. Dad doesn't have a choice. The voting shares are already secured. Would you like to know how? I pulled up another document, one that made him sink back into his chair. Remember Aunt Catherine? The one you all dismissed as eccentric. Before she died last year, she signed over her shares to me. Not to mention the proxy agreements I've built with minority shareholders over the past 3 years. Face it, Marcus, it's over. Why? His voice cracked. Why do it this way? The secrets, the planning. Because you never would have taken me seriously otherwise. You needed me to be the failure, the cautionary tale, the sister who couldn't hack it in the real world. It made you feel better about your own mediocrity. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. The board meeting is at 9 a.m. Monday. I continued calmly. Your decision deadline is Sunday at midnight. Oh, and Marcus? The next time you want to spread rumors about someone's financial status, make sure they don't own the bank you're borrowing from. After he left, I poured myself a glass of the scotch Dad had always said was wasted on women. The same scotch I now owned a controlling interest in, through a subsidiary that had quietly acquired the distillery last spring. James appeared with a fresh stack of reports. Your father's been trying to reach the board members. No one's taking his calls. And the offshore accounts, untraceable, as designed. The shell companies are locked down. Even with their best lawyers, they'd never find the connection. I nodded, scanning the latest projections. Marcus would take the deal. His ego was big, but his survival instinct was bigger. Dad would fight longer, holding onto the myth of his legacy. But in the end, it wouldn't matter. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Mom. Dinner tomorrow? Just us? I smiled faintly. 20 years of missed dinners, of disapproving looks and backhanded compliments. Now suddenly she had time. Sorry, I typed back. Board prep all weekend. Maybe next time. Setting my phone to do not disturb, I turned back to the window. Somewhere in the city, my brother was probably drinking himself into anger or acceptance. My father would be in his study, realizing his empire was slipping through his fingers. And me? I was just getting started. The real question wasn't whether I'd win, that was already decided. The question was how much of the truth I should reveal at Monday's meeting. After all, the offshore accounts were just the beginning. Marcus had no idea about the tech patents, the Asian markets, the renewable energy contracts. He didn't know about the team of brilliant minds I'd assembled while he was busy playing golf with Dad's old friends. A notification popped up on my screen. Another major shareholder pledging their support. The numbers were already well past what we needed, but each new signature felt like vindication. I opened my safe and pulled out one last document, the original business plan I'd written 5 years ago, complete with today's date circled in red. Everything had happened exactly as I'd mapped out, down to Marcus's late-night visit. Some would call it revenge. I called it revolution. And Monday would be just the beginning. Monday morning dawned clear and sharp, the kind of autumn day that feels like a fresh start. I stood in front of my closet, considering the armor I'd wear for today's battle. The choice was deliberate. A black Alexander McQueen suit that cost more than Marcus's first car, Louboutin heels, and my grandmother's sapphire pendant, the one piece of family jewelry I'd kept. The board members are all present, James informed me as I stepped into my private elevator. Your father arrived early, trying to corner them individually. Marcus signed the papers last night. Of course he had. Self-preservation always was his strongest trait. And the media? Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, and Bloomberg are all waiting for the press release. The Forbes photographer is on standby for after the vote. I nodded, checking my phone one last time. 16 missed calls from Dad, 5 from Mom. A single text from Aunt Catherine's old secretary. She would have loved this. The Blackwood Financial Group's headquarters took up 30 floors of prime Manhattan real estate. I'd worked here briefly after college, back when Dad still thought he could mold me into his image of success. Now, walking through the marble lobby, I felt nothing but calm certainty. Miss Blackwood, the security guard nodded respectfully, already informed of the changing winds. The board is waiting in the main conference room. I could hear raised voices before I even reached the door. Dad's distinctive baritone carried through the wood. This is impossible. There must be some regulation against. I pushed open the door, and the room fell silent. Every head turned. Board members, legal counsel, and there in the corner Marcus, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Good morning, I said smoothly, taking my place at the head of the table. The seat had always been Dad's. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. This is outrageous, Dad started, but the board chairman, Mr. Richardson, cut him off. Robert, please. The votes are already confirmed. This meeting is a formality. I opened my briefcase, removing a single folder. Shall we begin? Sarah. Dad's voice cracked slightly. Whatever we did, whatever drove you to this, we can talk about it. As a family. That's exactly the problem, I replied calmly. You've always seen this as a family business. I see it as a business, period. And right now, it's an underperforming one. I gestured to the screen behind me, where James had pulled up the quarterly reports. 30% loss in value, client exodus, failed expansion attempts, and that's just the surface. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. He knew what was coming. The Asian Market Initiative? Dead in the water. The tech division? 5 years behind current innovations. While you were all celebrating maintaining the status quo, the world changed. And now it's time for new leadership. Leadership? Dad laughed, but it sounded hollow. You abandoned your position here, ran off to play entrepreneur. I smiled, pressing a button on my laptop. The screen filled with logos, dozens of them, representing companies across tech, energy, finance, and real estate. You mean these companies? My companies? The ones I built while you were telling everyone I was lost. Take a closer look, Dad. See if you recognize any of them. His face paled as he scanned the names. 3 of them were major clients he'd lost recently. 2 more were vendors who'd suddenly raised their rates. And there, right in the middle, was the offshore investment firm that had been quietly buying up Blackwood Financial Group shares. That's not possible, he whispered. Oh, but it is. You taught me well, Dad. Buy low, sell high, and never let emotions cloud your judgment. I just applied those lessons differently. I turned to the board. You've all reviewed the acquisition proposal. My offer stands at 40% above current market value, full retention of existing staff except senior management, and immediate implementation of modernization strategies. Mr. Richardson cleared his throat. The board has already voted. The motion passes unanimously. Dad slumped in his chair. Marcus stared at his hands. Now, I continued, let's discuss the future. James? My assistant distributed new folders to each board member. These are the first phase changes: digital transformation, AI integration, sustainable investment divisions. Everything the company should have done 5 years ago. And current management? Someone asked. Marcus has accepted a transition package. As for the CEO position, I looked directly at Dad. Retirement benefits are generous. I suggest taking them. The meeting continued, but Dad didn't speak again. He just sat there, watching as his kingdom transformed in front of him. When the final votes were recorded and the papers signed, he stood slowly. Why? He asked simply. Why not just tell us? Would you have listened? Or would you have dismissed me, like you dismissed every idea I ever brought to this table? He had no answer. As the board members filed out, many stopping to congratulate me, I felt a strange mix of triumph and sadness. Not for what I'd done, but for what it had taken to earn their respect. Miss Blackwood? James appeared at my elbow. The press is waiting. I nodded, gathering my things. Marcus stopped me at the door. The family dinner, he said quietly. This Thursday. Will you still come? I considered him for a moment. Will there be more announcements about my financial status? He flinched. I deserved that. Yes, you did. But yes, I'll come. Someone needs to explain to Mom why her country club membership just got upgraded to platinum status. Later that evening, alone in my office, I opened the safe one last time. Inside was a letter my grandmother had written me before she died. Don't let them define you, she'd said. Build your own empire and make it so big they can't ignore it. I smiled, thinking of her, the only one who'd seen past the family's expectations to what I could really become. My phone buzzed, a news alert. The story had broken. Blackwood Financial Group acquired in surprise move. Unknown tech billionaire revealed as founder's daughter. Below it was a quote from a market analyst. This could be the most brilliant long-game takeover we've seen in decades. If they only knew, the family firm was just the beginning. I had bigger plans. Plans that would reshape not just the Blackwood legacy, but the entire industry. I poured myself a glass of scotch, Dad's favorite brand, now my brand, and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, my family was reeling, reevaluating everything they thought they knew about their failed daughter. But I wasn't failed. I wasn't lost. I was exactly where I'd planned to be. The empire I'd built in silence was finally stepping into the light. And this time, there would be no more whispers, no more doubts, no more need to hide my success. I raised my glass to the city skyline, to new beginnings, I whispered, and to never underestimating quiet daughters again. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. But tonight, I would savor the victory that had been 5 years in the making. After all, success is the best revenge. And I was just getting started.